Welcome to the Zest podcast, the podcast that flips the script on traditional coaching. Here, we challenge the status quo by turning coaching relationships on their heads. Instead of the usual dynamic where coaches lead the way, we give the coachee the mic. Each episode, a coachee interviews their coach, diving into topics they're both passionate about, be it leadership, personal growth, or navigating challenges such as neurodiversity in the workplace. Our unique format inspires authentic conversations, shared learning, and fresh perspectives. We are showcasing the dynamic chemistry that comes from real-world coaching relationships. The mission is to disrupt power dynamics, spark curiosity, and offer you inspiring, zesty insights into work, life, and everything in between. So join us as we explore bold ideas, unfiltered stories, and the transformative power of coaching, zesty style. Hi, Rachel.
Hi Anna, how are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Shall we introduce ourselves for the purpose of everybody listening?
Yeah, of course. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm a business psychologist, consultant, visiting lecturer, and a PhD researcher at the University of Hertfordshire. My PhD research is all about difficult conversations at work, what makes them hard, what they bring up for people, how we might navigate them or approach them differently. And I also come to this conversation as someone who's lived through cancer and who's learned a lot about how power can show up in conversations as well. And obviously, Anna and I, we know each other from working together for about 4 years now in various different roles. I started at Zest Psychology as an intern, progressed to being a psychologist on a permanent basis with you, and now I work as an associate for Zest. So we've got a continued working relationship which has evolved over time. So I think that's me.
Lovely. Um, so I'm Dr. Anna Kane, and I'm the founder of Zest, and I run Zest. So I'm a um, practitioner first and foremost, but a researcher as well. So I did my doctorate. Well, I've been an occupational psychologist for 21 years, and I did my doctorate in 2018. And my research is in authentic confidence in the workplace. And I set up Zest about 5 years ago to bring authentic confidence fully into my coaching and work that I do with all teams and organizations. And so, yeah, I'm a coach, a facilitator, a researcher, and general dog's body.
Bit of everything.
Yeah. Um, so yes, and it's great to be here with you today, Rach. And I love that our relationship has many different facets to it. And one of the things that we wanted to bring to the podcast today was um, our our conversations. We have many conversations,
Mhm.
and um, we might arrange to meet for 10 minutes for a catch up over something, and an hour and a half later, if we both happen to have that amount of time on that day, we might be finishing our conversation, having covered lots of different things,
Mhm.
both personal and professional. Um, so I think that's what I'm excited about doing today, just letting the conversation unfold in relation to both of our work and research and personal lived experiences as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What you said about our conversations flowing totally resonates with me. I always enjoy them. It's been a big part of my sort of development, I think, over the last few years as well, is just being able to have those conversations. And I think it ties in quite nicely with the whole theme of sort of what we wanted to talk about today, and those power dynamics within conversations and how much they influence sort of how people feel and heard and how experiences are shared and things when you are having conversations with people, especially when there are power dynamics at play in those
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah, yeah. Um, and because we all know the different power dynamics from our different roles, don't we? So in in one relationship, the power dynamic might be in your own favor, maybe as researcher, um, or as a psychologist working with clients. One might suggest that the power dynamic is in the favor of those roles. But then we also play other roles, don't we, where we might feel we don't have as much power in a conversation, and it tends to rest with the other person. Um, so everybody knows the different experiences of owning power or holding power, and and then being in a lesser recipient of power. So I think that's going to be pertinent to our conversation today, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key things that comes up for me, and it's sort of based on my own lived experiences, but also my research as well, is what power actually means in a conversation. So I think often for me, it's not about dominating a conversation or who's got sort of control over the outcome necessarily. It's about who gets to speak and who gets to be heard and whose perspective kind of shapes what happens next. And in my research, a lot of people sort of held back from having conversations because there was a lot of fear around how that conversation would unfold, depending on who they were talking to. They didn't necessarily feel like they were in a position to sort of share their voice and to be heard necessarily. And I thought that was quite an interesting insight that came out from all those conversations I had with the participants. And it really resonated with my own experiences as well of sort of health conversations and how often the people that I'm conversing with about my health and the outcomes, they're always the ones that make the decisions ultimately. And it was often quite difficult to have my voice heard and to sort of say, actually, this is what really matters to me. This is what's important for me in this conversation. And you've got your own agenda of the information that you need to share with me, and you're kind of missing my perspective and
Yeah,
what's important for me to get out of this conversation. Um, so yeah, so for me, sort of having that shared power, realizing that it's a space for everybody to be heard and to have a voice is a really important aspect of this. Um, and I think for me, I'm quite interested from your perspective of as a coach, how you go about sharing power in a coaching conversation, because obviously it's quite easy to imagine that the coach is the person that sort of controls that conversation. I imagine a lot of people sort of see it as the coach will guide it, the coach will be in control. And I'm not sure that's an accurate representation. So I'd be interested to hear how that works in a coaching perspective.
yeah, yeah. And I'd love to share that, but first I'd like to just follow up a bit on some of what you've said about your experiences and that power dynamic in a health conversation where there's someone, I'm assuming you're referring to like an employer or a client or um, a university um, professor or like an academic in your research world where there's a conversation happening about you and your health, but the the employer or your supervisor or whoever is the whole the theoretical holder of power. But then at the same time, I'm kind of thinking then the people on that side of the conversation must also feel disempowered to be able to approach certain conversations and topics because they feel like it's not their place to to go there to ask questions or to open up a conversation about health, which in theory is a personal thing, but obviously it impacts your work and your research, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point actually, because I think sort of from my perspective, when I imagine people having the power from the organizational perspective, it's about people making decisions about my workload
Mm.
and what tasks I can be allocated, or sort of making assumptions about my capacity and things like that, and
Yeah,
then making decisions in terms of whether they'll give me work or whether they'll um, allow me to be more flexible in my work, or and
yeah,
things like that. But I guess ultimately, in some sense, I do have the power because it's kind of my decision into how much I share and to how much information I give them about what's going on for me as well. So
yeah,
it is split in that way. And for someone sort of who needs to know something, approaching me and knowing how to do that also does put them in a lesser position of power, because that, you know, it's my health, my circumstances, and to then inquire about that must be quite challenging as well.
yeah, yeah. And and there's a fear, isn't there, that people will approach it the wrong way or ask the wrong question or feel like they're they're invading your personal space and information that you
Mm.
hold about yourself and that there's it's like, how do I know how you're going to respond? I don't know. So how do I approach this? I don't know. So it's quite complex, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that fear is on both sides as well. So it is the fear of saying something wrong, perhaps making a mistake in the phrasing or the words that you use, potentially upsetting someone or bringing up something that's sensitive or that might sort of be emotional for them to discuss. But there's also the fear on the other side from the person on who's being asked about how much do you share, how much do
Yeah,
you offload to somebody else, what burden that might then place on that person if you give them more information than they're ready to handle, perhaps,
yeah,
or so it's sort of an ongoing challenge, really, that it just becomes really complex.
yeah.
Potentially the less you share, the more difficult it is, but ultimately if you share more, then that could make the other person feel less comfortable, because they're then dealing with sort of really personal information that they just don't know what to do with or how
What
to
to do with it? Yes.
manage as well. So it's a real
Yeah,
delicate balance, I think.
it is, isn't it? So what's if someone was listening to this and in a similar situation, either side of the power dynamic, what do you know from all of your lived experience and research that can support people in those circumstances?
So I think for me, the most helpful approach is just open curiosity. It can feel quite uncomfortable to be curious, but I think there's there's sort of a delicate balance between being pushy and demanding information to just being open and curious. So allowing people to understand that they've got the choice to share what
Yeah,
they need to share. So if for example, if I know that somebody is open and willing to listen to what I need to talk about, then I will go into that conversation feeling a lot more comfortable about what I can share, and I can make decisions about how much I share. But if I feel like somebody's kind of closed off and not interested and not even curious to know what's going on, it makes it really difficult for me, and I will shut down and just decide not to disclose or to share anything, because I
yeah,
don't feel like there's that curiosity or that there's that willingness to kind of hear my perspective and share in
mm,
that.
mm,
So I think for anybody that's in the opposite position, it is just about saying, I'm here to listen, I'm here to support, I'm curious about your experience. I want to hear from you what's going on for you, and
yeah,
how I can help you move forwards, or how I can support, or whether you just need someone to hear, to listen.
yeah,
um,
yeah,
it's not always about having the right answers or to fix things or to solve problems necessarily. Sometimes it's just enough to say, if you need to, I will listen,
Yeah, yeah,
and we can
and
go from there.
yeah, and it's because it's reminding me of conversations we've had over the years, and from so you'll know that the way that Zest runs is that it's very agile, it's very adaptive to different people's needs and different kind of working styles and so on. So we kind of go out of our way to create an environment where people can create a space for them that works for them, as long as they speak up about what they need, because we're not mind readers. Um, but I it kind of makes me think about people who work in different organizations where things aren't so agile and adaptable and flexible. And I know, I do a lot of work with um, government organizations, and they have a lot of like flexible working, condensed hours, but not all organizations have that, and some are really one size fits all. And so for me, I'm wondering, and it's just a wondering about how like say a line manager who has a team member who's experiencing something like cancer treatment, like you did, and they have very fixed, like um, a culture to work
Yeah.
in. I wonder how turning up with just a curiosity, and I don't mean just in the diminutive sense, but as in purely a curiosity to have that conversation, how that feels for them in terms of like, I've got to make sure that I deliver X widgets, and I've got so many people on this and that. They've got a lot of things to boxes to tick. I find that interesting how they might approach a scenario where actually they need to simply be curious when the world around them is very defined and
Yeah.
restricted.
Yeah, I think I don't know that I necessarily have the answer for that. I think it's a really
No,
interesting point to raise. Um, I do think sort of the culture that you work in does play a big role in whether people feel they've got the kind of skills and the confidence to approach these kinds of conversations. And I think the environment does play a big part in that. So as you
mm,
said, sort of Zest creates that kind of culture of openness and transparency and shared space already, but not everybody has that opportunity to work in that kind of space. So it's probably sort of a brand new, out of their comfort zone, not what they're used to kind of conversation. Um,
no,
I think for me, ultimately, it's just about being human, sort of
mm,
having that human touch. I think even if your role is rigid and kind of very structured and you've got policies and procedures to follow, ultimately we are all human beings in the workplace, and
yeah,
hopefully you can draw on some of that natural instinct of being a human being to kind of navigate those initial conversations, at least even as a starting point.
yeah, yeah. And we do know that, you know, people with acute health conditions and chronic health conditions will end up leaving work in many scenarios because there just isn't the flexibility available for them to work according to their health needs. Um, but at least the journey and the interactions and the connection that you have with people around that process can, like you say, still be human and less bruising than it might be in situations where there's a brick wall that you're facing rather than a human being who can see that there's a need for a heartful conversation or heartful conversations. It's probably not just one, is it?
And I think one of the things I think that stood out both from my research and from my own lived experiences is that often people feel the need that they have to have the answers, they have to know what to say, they have to be able to direct people in the right direction. And actually, more often than not, that's not what's needed. You
No.
know, you don't always need solutions. You don't always need those practical. Obviously, they are required in some circumstances,
Yeah.
but more often than not, just having that conversation in the first place and being able to share what someone needs to share in their own way can make the world of difference in the world of work, because it just starts that conversation. It doesn't need to be
Mm.
the end of it. It can just
Mm.
be that beginning. So I think in the beginning, it isn't about knowing how to respond or knowing all the answers and knowing exactly where to point someone or what adjustments to make or any of those things.
Yeah.
That first initial bit is purely that open listening, hearing,
Yeah.
and then moving forwards from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I know in your work, you're almost like the other opposite end of the difficult conversations spectrum, if anyone thinks that there is such a thing. But it like the difficult conversations that tend to get spoken about in the world of occupational psychology and management, um, leadership and management conversations is usually about like there's a probability of performance. I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you what I want it to be instead of what it is, and so it can difficult conversations are often perceived to be that kind of conveying of information, aren't they? I've got a message that you don't want to hear. Whereas in a way, yours is flipped, isn't it? It's like you've got a message that I might find difficult to hear and you might find difficult to share with me. And my job is simply to listen.
Yeah.
If it's, you know, me being, say, your manager when you worked for Zest, it was never about me saying, right, okay, well, listen up, Rachel.
No, exactly that, exactly that. Yeah. And interestingly, in my research, I sort of went into it thinking everyone thinks about difficult conversations, as you've said, performance management, providing feedback or giving negative feedback. Conflict management comes up a lot when you mention the phrase difficult conversations at work. That's kind of the automatic go-tos. But interestingly, in my research, it was those personal conversations that were perceived to be the most difficult for people. And that was both from a manager and an employee perspective. Um,
Yeah,
so things about health, identity, well-being, the ones that touched on who someone was, not just what they did, were the ones
yeah,
that people found the most challenging. And again, it sort of centered around a lot of those fears that we already talked about, where people are worried about getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing. There aren't policies and procedures to follow. There isn't a strict sort of guideline for having a conversation about someone's mental health, for example. Whereas
yeah,
there is a procedure often for how you go about a performance management conversation. There might be a
yeah,
framework you can use,
yeah,
but there
yeah,
isn't things in place like that for these identity conversations, those personal things that are different for every individual that has or wants to have them, because
yeah,
every individual's own circumstances are very unique and very personal to them, so that there's
yeah,
no kind of this is how you do it, you say this, you do this, you go there. It
yeah,
doesn't work like that for those sort of personal health.
yeah. There's no there's the swearing alert coming up. There's no shit sandwich framework for it. Like
There
you
isn't, no.
when people give feedback and they do good feedback followed by the difficult feedback followed by some positive again. It's just not that structured, is it?
No, and again, there's a lot of models in the healthcare sort of sector where that have come about from doctors speaking to patients, for example. But again, it's still that top-down lens. It's still
Yeah,
that I've got some information to pass on to you. this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with care, compassion. I'm going,
Mm.
all of those
Yeah.
things which are
Yeah.
important, but it is still very much from that lens of, I've got some information to impart to you.
Yeah.
You're going to hear it, and we're going to
Yeah.
move on.
I know something about you that you potentially don't know about yourself. And so I'm going to be telling you this news about you that you're going to find difficult to take on board,
Yeah,
whether it be healthcare or your performance at work or whatever that kind
yeah,
of traditional difficult conversation is.
yeah. Or, we're making changes at work, and your job
Yeah,
is at risk.
yeah, yeah.
That kind of thing.
But whilst we've been talking, I've been thinking also about the fact that this is, we've been talking about it in the context of um, someone who typically has less power in the workplace needing to have a conversation with someone who has more power. So, say a line manager and a direct report, the direct report having some health things that they need to have a chat to their line manager about. But actually, it's not just about that, because it flips the other way. There's been times in our relationship where I've had to have difficult conversations with you about my health
Yeah,
and what what that means for me and what it means for the business and what it means for the work that we do together. And so I've been through my own significant health experiences in my own ways as well. And it that's the thing about health. It's not discriminatory.
no,
Everybody, as we learned during COVID, everybody's impacted and affected by health issues. And okay, I mean, I won't get on to health inequalities because that's a whole different
oh,
subject, and we
oh
know
yeah,
that there are inequalities around health, and so I'm acknowledging that, but parking it as well. Um, but in terms of like the power dynamic, for me, having to talk to the team at the time about, okay, look, I'm going to have a major operation. Da, 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 these are my, there's I had a cancer risk, so on. Then it's it's like as someone who's technically got more power, then that can be really hard as well, because there's that whole thing mixed up with, am I allowed to be vulnerable in front of
yeah,
the team that I lead? What will it mean for them if they feel like I'm not here to support them, and I might need some more support from them during this period of my life? And then like everything's up in the air in terms of power, isn't it? And how do people deal with that? It's the same thing, isn't it? You need people to be able to listen to you and to
yeah.
hear where what you're going through and what you might need from them.
Yeah, I think you've raised quite an important point there about sort of the whole vulnerability and leadership question as well. I think we hear a lot about how much people should share in the workplace and how much is professional, and there's a lot of language around
Mm,
professionalism and what's okay to share and what's not, and
oversharing.
oversharing, yeah, which for me is a term that I just really don't like, because I don't think you can
No,
overshare. I think you
no,
share what's important to you and what's meaningful and what matters and what's going to help you.
yeah,
um yeah, so it does sort of bring about all of that. I'm interested in sort of how you navigated that time when you were the one in that position of having to share, like what kind of went through your mind. How did you make the decision on what to share and when to?
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was an interesting time because I was also in the middle of delivering a big program that had like 1,600 people on it, and I was like the face of the program as far as all of the participants were aware. Obviously, it wasn't just me, because you can't single-handedly organize and run a program that big, but being the face of that and then leading a small team that oof, I don't even know how to start answering it because I mean the thing that I have, which sometimes works in my favor and sometimes doesn't, is that I am kind of monumentally honest, and people kind of like it about me, but they could also find it quite hard work because there's nowhere to hide in my kind of personal relationships and possibly my work relationships, and it's probably what adds to what makes me a good coach, dare I call myself a good coach. Um, so like my with my clients, the clients that I was working very closely with on that large project, that there was no choice for me. I simply had to talk to them about it. So with them, I just said, look, can we have a team meeting? I've got some news that I need to share
Yeah,
that is, it's difficult news. I go, gosh, I can feel myself welling up at it now. Because they were really supportive, and so the kind of non-decision to be completely honest with them and talk about what was happening was critical because we had to make decisions about what to do with the project and and how that would move forward. I couldn't have not shared it
yeah,
with them. I could have kept some stuff maybe under the surface, but I think that would have made the decision making more difficult, and and it certainly would have disempowered my clients, which I'd never want to do. Um, so with that, it was quite clear for me, turn up. Everybody knew that something difficult was coming
yeah,
in the conversation, and they were just immediately really supportive. So I was very grateful for that space, and I felt really touched by their response, which maintained during the period of my operation and subsequent recovery period. Um, but with the team, because the team is is more, everybody's there on their own kind of terms and doing their own, taking part in their own way. It was it was a matter of having individual conversations rather than telling the whole team at the same time
yeah,
and telling everybody the same information, because it just felt to me like not everybody needed to know all of the details, and in terms of my capacity to be, because when you tell people stuff about yourself, you do need to do some thinking about their capacity for holding
yeah,
it and what that means for you in terms of um, what they require from you. And so in a way, you have to kind of manage that bit and think, okay, you can probably live without some of this information, and you'll be fine, and you won't feel kind of locked out of what's going on. But at the same time, I won't have to give you too much to carry, and then support you in carrying it. And then
yeah,
with other team members, such as yourself, then I was, much more honest and open, and I'm not saying I was dishonest with other people, but I provided much more. I gave you the full picture, and so
yeah,
that it's about, that I think that's the process I went through. Whether it was the right process or not, I don't know, but um, you can only really judge for yourself, can't you, as
yeah,
to what feels right and what might be too much for you and for others in terms of those conversations.
yeah. I think what sort of really resonates from that is that kind of um I'm not sure if emotional labor is the right term for it, but that
Mm,
emotional labor involved in trying to work out what to share, who to share, how much to share, etc. And it changes and it's different for each person that you're interacting with.
yeah,
Um, and it isn't just about thinking about your own capacity, it is about thinking about the capacity of the other person as well.
yeah,
And I think that's quite an important part of just difficult conversations in general. There are always two parties, it's not just a one
yeah,
sided conversation.
yeah,
Um, which I think often they are framed as one-sided. Again, going back to that, I've got news, deliver it to you, right? But there is an impact on that other person, on that person receiving that message, whether it is a shared conversation or a one-directional message. There's still an impact, and you still have to be considerate of how that person's going to receive that information and what they're going to be able
Yeah.
to do with that moving forwards.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
quite interesting hearing you talk about how you managed that and how you considered that when you were sharing with different people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It does, I think it does need to be done to consider their capacity. Yeah. And it's making me think about, the work that I do as a coach in terms of the the level at which you go into conversations with people when you're coaching them. I think that's that's the same. There's a to, similar kind of process involved in that too, because coaching conversations, I believe, should have a level of difficulty about them, because otherwise you're not putting people into that space where they're really challenging their thinking, or like stress testing their ideas or their thoughts or their narratives, how they see themselves, their identity. Because in all of those corners and places, there's room for for unhelpful thoughts, unhelpful narratives, unhelpful identities to be lurking. And if we can challenge those and push people's boundaries on them, then they can choose to let go of unhelpful and bring in, or nurture the helpful thoughts, narratives, identities, and so on. And but not everybody's ready for everything at the same time. So whilst you may work on a similar thing with one person, to another person, the level at which you hold those conversations needs to be done in alignment with how much do I sense that you're ready for this. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Like, how do we know in terms of what we what we give to people, what we choose to hold back? How do we know that? How do you really tune into that? Because it might be something that they say, and so you might have a thought, oh, well, they said this, so therefore I think they're not ready for it. But for me, it's usually a deeper knowing, isn't it?
yeah, I was going to say, I think sometimes it just feels like a bit of intuition, doesn't it? And I guess that does depend on the depth of the relationship that you've got. I think it's probably much easier to sense those things with someone that you know a bit more or you're more familiar with, than someone that you've just met perhaps, or that you don't engage with on a regular basis. But it is a really challenging thing, isn't it, to kind of test those waters and then to sort of make a decision as to whether or not you probe further, or you go, nope, they're putting up a wall, this is time to stop, or they're putting
Yeah,
up a wall, but I should just push this a little bit and challenge them a bit more on that. Like,
yeah,
it's a really delicate kind of thing to, I guess that's where your skills as a coach really come into play, because you've obviously got some tools and things that you can use in those scenarios to work out where to go and what's needed.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, you don't always get it right, but for me, I think it's like the embodied sense of what's happening for someone is, and I know some listeners will be like, what does embodied mean? I hear that question a lot, and it's about using like your internal sense and insights around a conversation. So it's like that thing when you walk into a room and there's two people in there having a conversation, and you think, oh, this there's something happening here that maybe I'll go out and come back half an hour later because there's
Yeah.
something happening in this room, and no one said a word, but you know it with your body that there's a tension or a difficulty in the air.
Yeah.
So that's embodied for me. That's one way of describing embodied. Um, but like it never ceases to amaze me how you can really connect with someone that you've never met before and really tune in to like what's happening for them. I was I was I'm doing a program at the moment learning um, systemic coaching and teamwork using constellations as an approach. Um, Obviously, I already know how to coach individuals and teams already, but it's like kind of adding another way of relating to people. And we did a practice in one of the breakout rooms, and so I met someone that I've never met before, apart from in the kind of intro space in the group. Um, and we had to do a practice where we sat and we sensed into their ancestry and how their ancestry was kind of impacting them on a day by day basis. And I got a really strong sense about this woman and what was happening for her. And I was kind of a bit nervous about sharing it because I was like, is it my place to say this,
Right.
what I see? Because some of it was difficult and some of it was not difficult. Um, so I tentatively shared it, and she was like, "Yeah, absolutely spot on. That is exactly what my ancestral line is like." And she shared a bit more about it, and it and it was very accurate. And I just find that really amazing that you can spend very little time with someone, but if both of you are willing to lean in and be open to that kind of energy between
Yeah.
you and ability to tune into each other's energy and systemic connections, then it can happen. And like for me, I'll never cease to be amazed by the power of a connection that isn't all about the words that we speak.
Yeah. I find that really fascinating. I mean, yeah, I'm just kind of trying to take in what you said. It sounds like an amazing thing. I kind of struggle a little bit with the embodied side of things. For me, that's something that's quite new to me. And I've learned a lot about it through your research and your embodied authentic confidence model and everything. So it's something that really fascinates me, but it's not something that comes naturally to me. And there's a real discomfort around kind of allowing myself to feel things. Um, and that kind of brings me on to my next kind of thing that I wanted to talk about was that discomfort in conversations, that discomfort in coaching conversations and stuff, and how we lean into discomfort rather than avoiding it, which I think is often a go-to response when we
Yeah,
feel uncomfortable.
yeah,
And yeah, so I'm kind of interested in your take on how you lean into discomfort, how you use discomfort in your. I think you've touched a bit on it on your in your what you've said already, but in coaching
yeah,
conversations, how you encourage people to get over that barrier of just wanting to run a mile when things get.
yeah, yeah, uncomfortable. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting though, what you've just said makes it kind of it brings to mind for me like the different layers of difficult conversations. So in terms of being prepared to have a difficult conversation with someone else, we have to we have to prepare ourselves for that. And yet the our 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 embodied experiences that feel difficult, that's a difficult conversation we need to have with ourselves, isn't it? And actually it's like, oh, maybe we could look at it slightly differently. How many different ways are there to have difficult conversations? And is it always between two people? No, it might be internally, just our own difficult conversations, the things that we're prepared to admit to ourselves,
or the things that we're prepared to feel or sense internally, that is a difficult conversation for
Mm.
me in many ways. Um, so yeah, so what was the question about how to lean into difficult stuff?
Yeah, and discomfort.
Yeah, um, yeah, it's interesting because um, like the part of this program that I'm doing, we were encouraged to do the Enneagram, which is like a spiritual personality questionnaire. So occupational psychologists, as far as I'm aware, don't use it because it's um, well, as far as I'm aware, they don't use it. I'm not gonna get caught up in that. But I did it, and like my type is someone who likes to have fun and enjoy themselves, and be stimulated by new things, um, and so it not my personality type. If I don't have a spiritual practice or um a kind of meditation practice or something that helps me ground myself and center myself in me and how I feel, then it's very easy for me to just like be like a magpie. Oh, look, new shiny things, and
Right.
like enjoy, like, after a day of work, rather than go home and chill out, I'll get my energy from catching up with a friend and having a good old chat. So, but those kind of reactions and habitual leanings mean that I wouldn't lean into the difficult stuff. And when I was younger, I didn't lean into the difficult stuff. I used to be busy distracting myself and um, just looking for enjoyment all the time. But as I've got older, I've realized that I can't actually sustain that way of living, and actually it's much more fulfilling to lean into the difficult stuff. So my mindfulness practice is really important, and I use focusing, which not many people have heard of, but it's a way of relating to what's happening internally, um, and doing that in company as well, doing it with other
Mm.
people, so that you're listening to other people's discomfort and helping them make sense of that through listening, and then someone witnessing you or listening with you helps with your own making sense and being with what's happening internally. So I've had to like, I went to university to learn how to do this. I did a 8-week course. Well, I taught myself mindfulness when I was traveling because I had a lot of health issues that people couldn't help me with. So I just had to learn how to be with the discomfort of undiagnosed, untreated health conditions. So that was probably like my first opening to it, and then I found mindfulness and did an 8-week course, and then decided to do it. I studied it at Aberdeen University, but really we just went to um, Ling, which is like a Buddhist monastery in outside of Glasgow,
Mm.
and so we just sat on a mat for a weekend, after like we did 2 weekends a term for 2 years. And so I learnt to sit with my discomfort among a bunch of beautiful people and amazing teachers. And it got to the point where I realized that not listening to the difficult things meant I'd just been trapping them. And so they all needed to come out.
Right. Yeah.
And it was an intensely uncomfortable period in my life, because everything that I'd been busy not wanting to listen to was suddenly going, you're starting to listen now.
Here I
So
am.
yeah, hello, and me and me and me. So I went through quite a phase of like unearthing lots of stuff and having to process it and deal with it, make sense of it. and turn it into something growthful for me rather than letting it, um, drag me down, if you like. So, so from there, I've learnt that it's really important to turn towards the discomforts and the difficult things. And I've learnt that they do provide us with that space for growth. And and so then in terms of my coaching, having gone through my own process and my own stuff, then it equips me so much more for being able to sit and listen to people's
Yeah.
difficult stuff and to not feel, you know, upset by it, to not feel disgusted by it, or, like any of the reactions that people might get to other people's difficult stuff. Um, it's enabled me to sit and listen without judging, and and so trying to learn that with yourself first and foremost means you're more equipped to do it when you're in the coaching room, and then people start to open up because they say one thing and they don't get a negative response, so they feel safe and then they can open up and share more. And so, like you know that my model's about authentic confidence, and so really at the heart of that is acknowledging that we all spiral down in our confidence at times, and so it's about leaning in to those downward spirals rather than trying
Yeah.
to pretend they're not happening. Like an analogy that's just come to mind is, I don't know if you've ever had a cat, Rachel, but when you have a cat and you try and put it in its cat basket so that you can take it to the vet, and it's like
No.
it's clinging onto the sides, going, I don't want to go in, I don't want to go in, I don't want to get, because it's going to be a bad place.
Yeah.
That's what people can be like with their downward spirals. They're hanging onto the top of the spiral, going, no, I can't face it. I don't want to feel this. Um, and the kind of paradox is that you have to go through the difficult stuff to be able to work through it and then come out the other side. And it enables you to come out stronger because you learn along the way, and you learn about yourself. You see a bit more about yourself. You become a bit more self-aware. There's a lesson in there somewhere about something for you. And so if you can hold that, which is one of the hardest things, I think, when you're in a difficult place, to go, this will have some growth for me. And at the time you're like, oh, but it's so
Yeah.
awful. That's the, I think for me, like the really important bit about how to lean into the difficult stuff.
Yeah. I think something that really stood out for me when you were speaking then, I mean, a lot of it did, but sort of just drawing back to the whole power in conversations part was when you talked about how you are non-judgmental, how you create that space where people don't get those reactions that they might get other places. And I think
Yeah,
that in itself is just giving power to your coachees in that
yeah,
sense. It's
yeah,
saying, this is your space. There's no judgment. There's no criticism. There's nothing. There's none of that. Like,
yeah,
here you go. It
yeah,
might be uncomfortable, but we'll work on that together. And I think that's kind of a really powerful passing of power, in a sense, that
yeah,
really stood out
yeah,
for me there.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. That is how to not dominate the power in a coaching room, and to leave, plenty of silence and space, safe space for people to unpack stuff. That's
Yeah.
how you give them the power.
And in terms of your authentic confidence model, your Eddie model, is there anything that you think is particularly relevant to sort of powering conversations or coaching conversations that you really draw from your authentic confidence research, that the areas that people could develop or look at if they were looking to sort of develop their skills or approaches to navigating these kinds of discussions in the future?
So I think the the critical, well, there's a few critical bits about the model, but one of the things that, like, psychology is getting better at it, but historically it's always focused on the individual out of context, not in their social environment, not in, their systems, not in their places of work, their families. And it's foolish to look at people out of context, because we are our context. We can't be in this social vacuum. And so with confidence, it's about not just, am I skilled and knowledgeable to do what I need to do? It's about, how do I show up as me, and how do I connect with other people, and what thought and meaning do I put into those, how I connect with others and how they connect with me. And so then, in terms of um like what that means for people leaning into difficult conversations, it's not just about having a skill an or a knowledge that is needed. In fact, those are probably the furthest away for being good at having difficult conversations. The skill is being quiet and listening, but that's really about the connectedness. And so turning up to those conversations, being yourself, wanting to connect with people, and really leaving your expertise at the door, because the other person has the expertise on themselves, and you're there as a privileged witness to
Yes.
them sharing their expertise. And so you can do that confidently by leaning into the three components of confidence, which are competence, authenticity, and connectedness, and the right mindset. But also you can give them that too. So you can give them the fact that they're the expert on themselves,
Yeah.
and a chance to be who they are in that space that you show up to with them, and that together you create this connectedness. So if you understand that for yourself and for them, and try and hold that, then I think that's what you can give people.
Yeah, and I really like that. And I think that really resonates with what sort of came out in my research. So, just to give a bit of context, I applied the Combi model of behavior to some of my research, looking at people's capability, the opportunity, and their motivations for having difficult conversations, and sort of what drives that behavior and what contributes to avoiding. Um, and often people attribute a lack of skills or a lack of knowledge about the situation, or they blame opportunity. So I don't have time, or I don't have the space, physical space. We don't have a private meeting space for these
Mm,
conversations.
mm,
But actually, what came out of my research was that the biggest driver for action or avoid, the biggest barrier to avoidance was motivation. And it was all
mm,
those internal things. So it was about the self, it was about what mattered to the individual, it was about how um, they felt about themselves, what their motivations were for having the conversation, whether they felt there would be a positive outcome, whether they felt it would be meaningful. It tied into sort of who they were, that authenticity element, touched on whether it was really valuable and important to those. So there was a lot around values and things. So I think your sort of model kind of really resonates hit there, especially the authenticity part.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
moving away from considering difficult conversations as purely skill based, and
yeah,
realizing that there's a relational and emotional psychological component to difficult conversations beyond the skills that you need to employ when you're having them,
yeah,
um, which is
yeah.
really interesting.
It is. It is. And I think those things can just be handy excuses, can't they?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, oh, fascinating. Fascinating. So, where are we at then, Rach? We could keep going, but I
We
think
we could indeed.
shall we have a go at wrapping up?
Yeah, no, of course. Um, I mean, I think it's always helpful to sort of think about one thing that you're taking away from the conversation today. I always like to reflect afterwards, but is there anything that sort of stood out that you're taking away from today's conversation?
Um, I think the bit that's felt really fresh to me, or really like a bit of an insight, um, is about difficult conversations aren't just um, in relationship with other people, that we do need to be having difficult conversations with ourselves as well, and that's really important, and not discussed, I don't think, as much as it could be. So so for me, I think that's going to be my key takeaway about having the concept of difficult conversations with ourselves. So yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of things. I think one of them is sort of around that vulnerability and that courage that it takes to bring your whole self to a conversation. Particularly drawing on where you shared about having to sort of talk about your health issues with your team, and that whole professionalism, what's considered professional, how much to share, how much is oversharing. That's something that I am challenged with on an ongoing basis with my own health conditions. How much to share, how much to go into, how much detail to give, and something I still find very difficult, even though I've been managing and living with this for quite some time now.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the other is sort of just about the power in conversations and how it's just about those small acts, those
yeah,
small shifts, those small intentions that could really just change the dynamics within a conversation. It doesn't have to be a big, grand gesture.
yeah,
It is just simply sort of being a bit human and being curious and open, as a starting point. I think for me, they're
yeah,
probably the key bits that I've taken from today.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. If we think, oh, I've got to have this big, massive conversation, then we put ourselves off it, don't we?
Yeah.
So is that going to be an invitation to listeners who want to have more power conscious conversations at work, to do bite size, or just like baby steps?
Yeah, absolutely. Just yeah, baby steps. It's not about having all the right approaches or answers. I think it is just make one small change to how you approach something the next time you're in that situation and see how it lands and how it works for you. Um,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
build from there. And again, I think just remembering that no two conversations will ever be the same, because
no,
everyone is coming with their own lived experience, their own identity, their own individuality. Um,
yeah, yeah. And for me, then it's like, again, just extending the invitation to just see if maybe there's just a little bit more of showing up as who you are to that conversation. Again, it's not like you'd have to reveal your whole vulnerable self in one go, but maybe there's just a little
yeah,
crack further where you could say, I could just show up a little bit more as myself in this conversation.
yeah,
Yeah, lovely.
I like that.
All right. So, well, are we concluding for today?
I think so, yes. I mean, I could keep talking to you for hours, Anna, as always.
Likewise,
But yeah, I've
likewise.
really enjoyed today's conversation. I'm sure it's going to spark many more between us and hopefully between everyone listening today as well. So thank
Yeah,
you.
hopefully. I've thoroughly enjoyed it as well, Rachel, as always. And it's lovely to be able to share it with some other people. So yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Thanks, Anna.